The Filipino short story in English. The short story in English is undeniably one of the crowning achievements in the Philippine literature. Since its introduction in 1900s, Filipinos have produced many outstanding short stories, original in conception, vigorous in appeal, universal in application, and written in excellent prose. Moreover, half a dozen Filipino short story writers, each with varying aesthetic concepts, have gained international recognition, with around 50 writers rising to national importance and many others continuing to gain prominence. The Filipino short story in English can be divided into three distinct periods. The first, known as the period of imitation, began in 1908 and ended around 1924. This was followed by the period of experimentation and self-assertion, which spanned from 1924 to 1935, a time when new writers emerged and joined their predecessors in refining the art of storytelling. The third period, known as the period of greater self-assertion, began shortly before the last war and has continued to the present day. George Bukubu, 1886 to 1965. He was a lawyer, writer, journalist, religious leader, educator, political scientist, and a successful college executive. He was one of the two pioneer short story writers, along with Mrs. Benitez, who took seriously the task of collecting works. He published The Radiant Symbol, a collection of short plays and stories. A Vision of Beauty. In A Vision of Beauty, George Bukubo writes about the Philippines having a lot of trees but few tree-lined streets and parks. It is more important to care for trees than to plant them, as most of them have died from neglect. He writes about how trees, like the ones in his garden, give him peace of mind and comfort. He hopes for the day when trees line on the roads and the country becomes more peaceful and beautiful. Paz Marquez Benitez, 1894 to 1983, a Filipino writer and educator. Her work received wide critical acclaim when she began writing fiction and essays in the early 1920s, and her stories are still frequently anthologized. Mrs. Benitez had written some 8 stories, the most outstanding of which were Dead Stars, The Siren of 34 Reel, and Night in the Hills. Dead Stars. Alfredo, who is betrothed to Esperanza out of duty and not love, looks back at his previous relationship with Julia, a woman he had loved so deeply but lost when he became engaged. As he struggles with his conflicting feelings, he comes to understand that his life has been filled of unrealized dreams, represented by dead stars that still haunt him. The story explores Alfredo's inner turmoil as he confronts the painful reality of his choices and the bittersweet nature of love and regret. The story delves into the complexities of human relationships and the long-lasting impact of previous loves on a person's present life.
Jose Garcia Villa, 1908 to 1997. He is one of the finest literary figures of the country. He is an artist of lasting significance and a major short story writer in English. He secured his position partly because he quoted the short story with the lyric devotion of an artist. Because he has more than talent, he always has something to say and has his own way of shaping his thoughts. The footnote to youth. Dudong, a young farmer, marries Piang at 17, thinking he's mature enough for the responsibility of marriage and fatherhood. Over the years, he becomes disillusioned with the relentless demands of family life and fatherhood, and Piang grows weary of her role, secretly regretting her choices. As Dudong grapples with his unfulfilled dreams, his son Blas, now of marrying age, expresses his intention to marry, repeating the cycle of youth's hasty decision and burdens. The story explores themes of youthful idealism, the burdens of adulthood, and the cyclical nature of life. Arturo Rotor, 1907 to 1988. Arturo B. Rotor is the author of The Wound and the Scar. This is a collection of short stories written when his creativity was at its peak. 9 stories stand out as especially distinguished in Rotor's collection, namely Dahong Palay, Zita, How They Brought the Convicts to Davao, Poison Claws, Flower Market, To a Greater Castillo, Vanity of Vanities, At Last This Fragrance, and Because I Did Not Ask. Dahong Palay. In the story, Sabio, a young man with a slender and weak appearance, struggles with the mockery and lack of respect from his village due to his physical shortcomings. Despite his inner strength, he fails to prove himself in social competitions, leading to feelings of humiliation. When he gets bitten by a venomous snake while trying to protect a girl named Mercy, he courageously uses his will and resourcefulness to survive, even straightening a horseshoe to treat the wound. In the end, Sabio earns the respect and admiration of the villagers, symbolizing the theme of inner strength and the breaking of societal expectations. Carlos S. Bulusan, 1911 to 1956. Carlos Bulusan was a Filipino writer who has attained prominence in America. He wrote America is in the Heart and Autobiography, and The Laughter of My Father, a collection of humorous stories. He also wrote a volume of poetry, The Voice of Bataan and edited Chorus for America, and Letter from America. In 1961, his Letters in Exile, under the title Sound of Falling Light, were edited by Dolores S. Feria. America is in the Heart. Carlos Bulusan's story traces his journey from rural poverty in the Philippines to harsh immigrant life in America, highlighting themes of struggles, perseverance, and hope, facing racism, exploitation, and hardship in his pursuit of a better life. Carlos becomes involved in labor movements and socialism while striving to write and make a meaningful impact. Despite health challenges and personal loss, he finds solace in literature and his poetry, eventually gaining recognition. The story ends with Carlos reflecting on his fate in America, despite all the adversity he faces, and his resolve to share his life story through writing.
Amador Tidaggio, 1912 to 1966. He was best known for his fictions and poems. He had published 2 volumes of poetry, Bataan Harvest and The Flaming Lyre. Of all the short story writers, Daggio is perhaps the one most devoted to giving accounts of our highland people, the mountain peoples of Luzon. One of his greatest contributions to Philippine letters is his highly authoritative translation into English of the Ifugao's epic Aliguyon. The Wedding Dance. The Wedding Dance portrays Lumnay's heartbreaking experience as her husband, Awiyaw, leaves her to marry another woman in hopes of having a child. Despite their love, societal expectation and the pressure to continue their tribe's lineage force Awiyaw to make this painful decision. Lumnay, left alone with her grief, ultimately chooses to leave the celebration and return to their shared fields, finding a somber solace in a familiar landscape. The story explores themes of love, sacrifice, and the clash between personal desires and cultural traditions, ending with Lumnay's solitary acceptance of her fate. Nick Joaquin, 1917 to 2004. Joaquin, constituting a literary world in himself, is Nicomedes Joaquin. Before World War II, Joaquin was practically unknown, but during the Japanese occupation years, Joaquin began to assert himself as a creative artist of a significance. Stories, poems, essays, and drama all come from his firm hand, leaving behind him the imprint of his unquestioned talent and virtuosity. In recent years, Joaquin writes regular features for the Philippines Free Press under his pen name Quijano de Manila. May Day Eve explores the cyclical nature of love and its illusionment through the lens of May Eve ritual. Agida and Don Badoy's youthful infatuation, fueled by superstition and romantic expectations, transform into a bitter marriage marked by resentment and a haunting image conjured by the mirror. The story closes with a cycle repeating as Don Badoy witnesses his grandson performing the same ritual, highlighting how the past illusions and disappointments can perpetuate through generations, leaving a legacy of fractured love. Francisco Arciliana, 1916 to 2002. He is a short story writer, poet, and critic. He has written numerous short stories of varying lengths and appeals.
His distinguished stories are Divide by Two, Yellow Shawl, and The Flowers of May. His remarkable stories are collected in book form in 1962 under the title Selected Stories. Divide by Two. The story shows how marriage falls apart because the couple can talk honestly and have secret desires. The husband ignores his wife, focusing on the neighbor's wife, while Belle is angry at her. They argue over a literal division of land, and the music playing reflects their emotion distance. The story ends with a tense standoff, leaving us wondering how their broken relationship will ever heal.
Australia D. Alphon, 1917 to 1983. She is a short story writer and playwright. Started writing stories before World War II. Alphon's best works are Magnificence, Need, Water from the Well, and Servant Girl. The last story was included in O'Brien's Best Short Stories for 1937, and her collection, Magnificence and Other Stories, was published in 1960. In 1962, 3 of her short plays won the 3 major prizes from the Arena Theatre. Servant Girl by Australia Alphon explores the harsh reality of societal class and servitude through Rosa, a maid who endures cruelty from her mistress and clings to the illusion of love and care from a kind cochero, Pedro. Her desperation for freedom and happiness leads her to romanticize his simple act of kindness, believing him to be her savior. However, she eventually realizes that her fantasies were mere escapes from her suffering, forcing her to accept her place as a mere servant girl. Bienvenido N. Santos, 1911 to 1996. He is a poet and fictionist from Albay and an established author. He is also a prolific writer and has received scholarships in the United States. He won the Palanca Memorial Award for his short stories, Even Purple Hearts, The Transfer, and The Day the Dancers Came. Scent of Apples by Bienvenido N. Santos follows the story of him who meets Celestino Fabia, a fellow Filipino emigrant longing for his homeland. Invited to Fabia's home, Santos observes the struggles and sacrifices of Fabia's life, particularly through his hardworking wife Ruth, and the stark contrast between nostalgia and reality. As they reminisce about the Philippines, Fabia chooses to preserve his memories rather than face the changes time has brought to his homeland. Conclusion. The short story in English is divided into 3 periods, which are the period of imitation, 1908 to 1924, in which the writers are called the pioneers; the period of experimentation and self-assertion, 1924 to 1935, and the period of greater self-assertion, which is the present. George Bacobo and Paz Marquez Benitez are pioneering writers in English. Moreover, Jose Garcia Villa, Arturo B. Rotor, Carlos Bulusan, and Amador T. Daggio are writers in the assertion period. Additionally, Nick Joaquin, Francisco Arceliana, Bienvenido N. Santos, and Estrella D. Alphon are writers in the present period. Most of the written short stories' themes serve as a reflection of Filipino society, emphasizing values like resilience, familial bonds, and the struggle for self-discovery. Its inspiration likely stems from the author's own experiences, the rich cultural history, and everyday lives of Filipinos, making it a significant contribution to Philippine literature. By capturing the essence of Filipino identity and experiences, the stories deepen readers' understanding of local traditions and social realities, ensuring their lasting impact on the literary landscape.